But the asshole manager, I'll just put it out there, went even a step further. Her manager walked around, talked to the other colleagues, and told the other colleagues what a weakling Katarina was.
Welcome back to
Cultures from Hell.
the podcast where we dissect the toxic environments that can wreak havoc on your professional lives. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that's all too common: burnout. We'll be exploring a real life scenario of someone pushed to the brink of the manipulative tactics used to try and keep them there. Joining me is Paulina, a company culture expert and the co-host on the show, to help us understand and navigate these dangerous situations. Hi, Paulina.
Hi, Lars. Good to be here again.
Yes, we are back. Another Friday recording a podcast. Best way to start any weekend, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yes, absolutely. The energy from the podcast always carries me through the entire weekend, honestly.
You're fired up for the weekend. Maybe we should start doing this on Mondays instead.
Good idea.
So, Paulina, we've heard a true story about a young woman driven to near burnout, then emotionally blackmailed when she tried to leave. What are the initial signs that someone is heading towards burnout?
Okay. Once more, I think I'll say this in every single episode. I'm not a psychologist, but from my personal experience, from what I've seen, and unfortunately, I have seen burnout quite a lot. I've been there once myself, and I've also seen it multiple times in friends and colleagues and even own team members. And there are multiple signs, but the first thing I usually have seen showing up is feeling overwhelmed, like not being able to focus anymore as well as they could be or used to be, and then following a decline in performance. And people might experience sleep disturbances, irritability. So you might see them react more emotionally or more aggressively to situations that they usually would have been very calm about, and a sense of detachment. So if you look very closely, you can see that they will not be as passionate about their job anymore. Things will be, will not matter to them anymore, or at least not as much as it used to be. And that's all before it slips into this chronic exhaustion. And also from what I've seen, people usually, if they are heading towards burnout, they don't really realize it themselves, and they keep pushing themselves, and they don't understand how truly exhausted they are. And usually they need someone from the outside, a loved one or a colleague or a manager, to point that out or to actually see it happening, because you're just so much in your own fog that you don't want to realize it, or you just can't realize it up to a certain point. And usually by the point you do realize it yourself, it's very far progressed already.
Yeah, I can speak for myself that for me, a typical sign of starting to be burned out is that I get so easily irritated about small stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes actually stuff that I usually like to see in other people.
Yeah.
So for me, and I've learned this over time, that once I get to that point, I need to pull the plug.
Yeah.
And trying to do that, but it's not always easy. Okay, like I started saying, Paulina, this is a true story. Again, like a true story that we got approached by, and thank you to everybody that are willing to share the stories on the podcast. We really appreciate that. Tell us the story, Paulina.
Yes. So also from my side, Katarina, thank you so much for sharing the story, for trusting in us, and for being that vulnerable. Because honestly, I've heard a lot of bad workplace stories, but your story, Katarina, really moved me quite a bit, because I think it is something that happens quite a lot out there that is not talked about enough, and it really shocked me to my core that somebody would approach you in that way. But let's head into the story. So Katarina had this job. It was one of her first jobs, and actually her first real office job, so to say. And so she was still very young. It's been a couple of years ago, and it was a very high pressure work environment where she was working. So there were long hours. There was no clear regulation in her work contract already, how things would be dealt with overtime. So she worked a lot. And not only did she work a lot, but there was always constant pressure in terms of the goals that they had to achieve. And the goals were extremely high stacked. They had to basically work round the clock in an environment where people would also not treat them very nicely, both on the customer side and on the internal side. So it was like ding, 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 let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, never stop, never stop, never stop. This kind of situation, which in and by itself already is obviously challenging. And she realized about 18 months into this job that she was actually not being able to deal with the workload anymore. And I mean, I don't want to go into too much details because that might give too much away from her backstory. But from what she told me, there were only 3 people in the team, and the workload they had was basically enough for 5 or 6 people. And she and another colleague approached her manager, and they told her that they needed support in order to handle this kind of workload and actually deliver the projects and the customer projects all on time and in the quality that was expected. And they kept being like pushed out, like, yeah, I completely understand that this is a problem, I'll take care of it. But nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. And in the meantime, they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And Katarina reached a point where she just had to call in sick because she couldn't do it anymore. And then she went to see the doctor, called in sick for a week, which isn't a long time to call in sick, but in that kind of work environment, already being sick for one single day was seen as a sign of huge weakness. And so she felt really nervous about being out sick this long. And that in itself already is insane, right? You do call in sick and you feel bad about feeling sick. If you're really, truly sick and you feel bad about being sick, that's huge red flag here. And she went back to the doctor after a week and asked him and if he could write her healthy again. That's how you say it in German, at least, right? So he would allow her to go back to work. And even while she said that, she started crying because she really didn't want to go back. And then the doctor, and she said, and I found this so beautiful how Katarina phrased it. She said he was a lifesaver in that moment because he actually told her, okay, I'm going to give you a notice not a notice, certificate for being sick for 3 more weeks if you go in today and quit your job, because you do need to quit your job, because otherwise you are heading straight into burnout. And she listened to him. And Katarina, I didn't say that to you when we had our conversation, but they were so amazingly strong. I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's so hard to see it for yourself where you're headed, and that you actually understood that and had the gut and the stamina to stand up for yourself and take care of yourself. I love that for you, girl. And so Katarina, being a good employee, decided I will quit, but I will do it the right way. I will do it in person. I will hand over my notice to my manager directly. and I will also offer to do a proper handover, which I personally think is amazing. Yes, it is something that you usually do, but in that kind of situation, when you're basically heading into burnout and when you're in sick leave, that's nothing I would expect from an employee. And so that's exactly what she did. She went into the office. And here's where the real fun begins.
Let's just agree when you say fun. This is a podcast where people can see it.
That's
this
true.
Is in quotation marks,
that
right?
That is in very, very fat, big quotation marks, because
yes, please.
This is where okay, I'll rephrase it. This is where shit really hit the fan. So Katarina hands in her notice, and her manager pulled like this 3-step emotional blackmail, personal attack, guilt trip, superstorm of shit on her that I found really, I was absolutely flabbergasted. So step number 1 was to tell her, how can you do this? You're leaving us alone. You're leaving us hanging. That's so unfair of you. That's not how a good team member actually reacts. You know the kind of workload that we have, and you're just leaving us hanging with all of that. How are we supposed to do it without you? And good for you, Katarina. You stayed strong. So the next step that her manager pulled then was to actually tell her that if you can't handle the work pressure here, then you will never be successful anywhere, because we are actually not that much of a competitive environment. And if you are so weak and can't deal with this kind of normal workload, then you're basically, I'm paraphrasing now, you're basically screwed out in the real world. So those 2 steps alone are already insane, right? I mean, how can you honestly talk to somebody who's clearly not well in such a manner? It's beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. But the asshole manager, I'll just put it out there, went even a step further, because then when Katarina actually did the handover in the office, her manager walked around, talked to the other colleagues, and told the other colleagues what a weakling Katarina was, and that she just wasn't cut out to make it, to hack it in this high pressure, wonderful work environment. And that really blew my fuse. Like just talking to other colleagues about a personal situation is a no-go per se. And then to badmouth somebody is not only bad for Katarina, obviously, but it destroys everything in the entire team that still was, if there still was anything there. And for Katarina's shock, also some of the colleagues joined into this bad-mouthing situation, which I can only imagine how difficult this must have been. And so that's Katarina's story. But before we move on, I just quickly wanted to say, Katarina, I'm so amazed on how you handled that. You told me that you found a way out of your exhaustion. You found a way to also process what you've experienced. You don't feel resentment in any way. You haven't let this show through in your following work relationships, in the sense that you still trust your manager. But what you've what you've also beautifully learned is to look deeper at your employers before you actually join there. You told me that you ask more questions about overtime, you ask more questions about the team structure, you try to get to know your manager better beforehand. And you also mentioned that before you joined that job, they told you in the interview that this was like a family situation where everything was like everybody was really close, and so on and so forth. And for me, comparing a workplace to family has always been the biggest red flag I've ever seen in the workplace. And I think from what I've heard, Katarina, is that you feel the same way nowadays, that you just, you look at the employer and try to assess how they work beforehand. And I'm so happy to share with all of you that Katarina is now in an employment and in a place where she's really happy, and where she can take care of her well-being and enjoy her job and really perform really well.
That is I will say, I'm going to use the word shocking. That's a shocking story.
Mm-hmm.
But, and there is a but in here, it's not the first time we heard a story like this, and it's not going to be the last time we're going to hear a story like this. This is the truly shocking thing, right? That these stories just keeps coming up over and over again, and you keep asking yourself, like, are there that many shitty leaders out there? But the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been down this discussion before, right? It's personal inability, it's lack of learning, it's lack of training, it's lack of self-reflection, of self-awareness. There are so many reasons for bad management, and not all of them lie within the person itself. But this kind of behavior is just downright disgusting.
Yeah, this one is close to being off the charts, right?
Yeah.
That you do something. So in this case, the manager used several tactics. They were minimizing the employee's experience, threatening their future career, which is insane.
Yeah.
And the third thing, which is, like I think you said it yourself, is probably the worst thing, is public shaming.
Mm-hmm.
Can you try to break down these, again, I'm going to put this in quotation marks, tactics? Why are they so damaging?
Well, I mean, I guess it's quite obvious that these tactics are very, very damaging. All of them are classic examples of emotional manipulation. And minimizing someone's experience actually invalidates their feelings, which can, in worst case scenarios, feel like you questioning your own experience in the long run, and you're just not trusting what you're seeing or what you're hearing, because you start to think, I'm misinterpreting situations. And so this basically detaches you from your own intuition. The career threat creates a huge amount of fear. And especially if you're at the beginning of your career, Jesus, do you know what I'm just thinking at the moment? I'm thinking, what if any manager listens to this and takes like notes on how to, if I want to do this, if I want to create fear, that's what I should do. Oh, Jesus. So no, this is not how to do it.
Don't go down that route, Paulina. That's not why we're here.
I know we're not here, but I just have this,
We also have to give credit to the good managers out there.
Absolutely. And I hope, and yeah, maybe we'll tell some good stories too in the long run. So yeah, but yeah, creating fear in the workplace never is a good idea, because fear always will destroy your energy and your motivation, and in the long run your performance, because nobody can actually function well in fear scenarios. And I've detailed this down in the last episode in more, so I'm not going to rant about it again. And public shaming obviously isolates and humiliates the individual and gives them the impression that they don't belong to the group, which in turn recreates this fear scenario in your old brain, you know, the brain that is responsible for making sure that you fight or flight.
Reptile.
And the reptile brain, thanks, that was the word I was looking for, the reptile brain. So, and then again, you are in a fear zone, and you will also feel helpless and feel trapped, and that is just going to accelerate depression, burnout, all of that kind of shit. So to all the managers out there, don't ever do it, ever.
No. And you just mentioned here in the last part, Paulina, you mentioned some of the long-term effects that this could have on people. Again, for this specific story, we were very happy to hear that she moved on and everything is as okay as it can be, because it should never have been happening. But what could be the long-term effects of stuff like this? Because it can have severe long-term effects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So long-term exposure to this kind of negative stress can lead to severe mental and physical health issues. That can include anxiety, depression, or even cardiovascular problems. It will definitely have an impact on your sleep. And if you don't sleep well, basically, I mean, I've been there. If you don't sleep, it's torture. Every mum out there knows it. So, yeah. And if your work situation contributes to any of that, obviously that's not healthy. And on top of all of that, on the physical and mental stress, it erodes trust with not just for you, but for the entire team. And it creates a toxic work environment. Everybody will be able to tell that this is not right. And they will all try to avoid feeling that same way for themselves. And that's also, from my perspective, why Katarina's colleague threw her under the bus at the end of this public shaming as well, because she just wanted to be very clear to her manager. I agree with you. And I'm not like that. I'm here to stay or whatever. Not a healthy response, but an understandable response. And yeah, because she tried to be on the safe side with the manager and not become publicly shamed herself. So she retreated onto the bad side. And I can very well imagine that Katarina's colleague feels really bad about this today for acting that way. But it is an understandable reaction in the situation.
Should we draw a direct parallel to today's political climate where there's no, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a big bully who kind of uses their power to get everybody to chime in and say like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do it. And everybody's afraid of speaking up, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment and a very fair parallel. I think there are a lot of big bullies out there at the moment, and it's shocking to see how many people comply with that, and very scary, to be honest. But I also see counter movements, people who do speak up, people who become very outspoken about it, people who are, and you see that to not go into a huge political rant here, I see that happening in work environments as well, right? You will see people who act up against this kind of behavior, and unfortunately, in the work environment, if it's intrinsic, like if the entire company works this way, then most likely you will end up leaving or getting fired if you speak up against this, which is to say, please speak up against it.
You don't want to work there anymore, right?
You have to speak up about it, because it can also work the other way. So in my old jobs, we also had the situation with one specific manager who was a shit show chauvinist, and people spoke up, and it took a long time, but at the end of the day, measures were taken, and he lost his job. And I think that's a really good sign that it is important to speak up and that you are not powerless, because if you do speak up to the right people and you have, you will always have the right to say it, but more often than not, you will also see an effect of it and good things coming out of actually speaking up. So I want to make sure that people understand the risks if they do it, but also the rewards that can happen. And honestly, if you are in that kind of environment and it affects you deeply because you're a good person, not because you're weak, let me be very clear about that as well, and they do fire you, I mean, obviously that's a shitty situation at the beginning, But do you honestly really want to stay in that kind of environment? I doubt it. I wouldn't want to stay there.
I'm just looking here. I'm just doing a quick Google search here. Because when we talked about this, and you said like there's coming a counter movement to everything, which also, like, again, one thing is the political climate, but also what will happen on the workplace and so on. I think it's a law of physics that says for any action you have a a reaction.
Yes.
Right. So I think it's just very common that every time somebody is like going to be the bully and just going to like pushes you at some point, somebody's going to give a reaction to that.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to be too philosophical on the show here, but I think it's just kind of how life balances.
Yeah.
That's what's make life balance, because there's always going to be a reaction to something toxic, right?
Absolutely. And that will be my last political comment for today.
Today.
There is a reason why most dictators are tumbled from inside.
Yeah, of course.
Dictators usually create their worst enemies themselves. And the same goes in the workplace. So let's rant over.
Rant over. This is not a political podcast. It might turn into be one at some point, but let's see.
Or it becomes the next project. Who knows?
Paulina, let's move on. We as always, we are running out of time. In this case, back to the story. If you have 3 tips to our listeners to avoid burnouts, what would they be?
Continuously to prioritize self-care, especially if you're in a high pressure environment. So make sure that you get adequate sleep, eat healthy, and exercise. I know this is kind of very obvious, but I can't. It's just the most best. It's just the best prevention tactic out there, just to really focus that you get rest. And especially coming from sales, I can highly recommend meditation and breathing exercises. That helps a lot too, just to regulate your emotions and your energy. And then I know this is easier said than done, especially for those of us working from home. Set clear boundaries between work and personal life. And lastly, seek support from trusted colleagues and friends, loved ones. And if you do realize that you're slipping down a slippery slope, don't be shy to reach out to professionals, because they do know what will help in your specific situation.
100%. Agree, 100%. And finally, what should a person do if they find themselves in a similar situation as the story you just told?
Okay. I think first of all, it's important to recognize if you're experiencing exhaustion because of overwork, or if this overwork stems from an actually unhealthy work environment. Because of course, burnout or exhaustion can also develop from a personal situation at home, or even within a very healthy culture, right? So not always burnout is a sign for bad culture. But if the reasons are to be found within your culture, I can only recommend to document those kind of pressure situations, even also messages that you get from your managers, and talk to HR if possible, potentially seek legal advice. And especially for the listeners in Germany, one of my favorite advices, have insurance for labor law. They are not super expensive and they can help a lot. Just a quick side note. And potentially call in sick rather sooner than later. Because if it's early stage, just 1 or 2 weeks off can still do you a world of good. Whereas, I mean, I've seen burnout cases where colleagues and team members left the company for 9 months, and it took them a really long time to get back into it. So listen to your body, and make sure that you get enough rest as quickly as possible. And again, we said this before, leaving a toxic environment is most of the time the healthiest option and the best thing you can do for your mental health. Even though I do know this is not an easy choice for everyone. Yeah, I think that's it from my end for today.
Perfect. So just to sum it up here, so burnout, as it is today's topic, is a very serious issue, and recognizing the signs which we have gone over is very crucial. I can only encourage everybody to remember that your health and well-being are paramount. Don't let anyone minimize your experience or manipulate you into staying in a toxic environment. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you experience that kind of thing, I can only really recommend, if you're being manipulated or harassed or publicly shamed, please make sure to get professional help. This can have so bad long-term effects. So yeah, just cannot recommend that enough.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you very much for sharing the story, and also giving your insights into what can you actually do. To all the listeners out there, you can follow Paulina on the Culture Code Foundation. We'll leave a link in the show notes, also to both her and my social channels. So if you have anything you want to share on the show, just reach out. We will keep everything as anonymous as you want. If you want to come on the show, we'll be happy to have you and talk about like how can we avoid culture from hell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lars.
You're welcome.
Thank you all of you out there. See you next week.
See you next week.